Today on Inside Utah Politics, election security and important deadlines you need to know about to make your vote count. The Lieutenant Governor is here to get us ready for the midterm election. And the Biden administration encouraging people to apply for student loan forgiveness, even though a judge has blocked the controversial program from going into effect.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson here to talk all things election this morning. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Glenn. It's great to be here.
A busy time. It seems like you're working 24/7 pretty much these days.
Election officials throughout the state are, this is definitely busy season.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. We're down to the final full week now. So what are the final preparations going into the big day?
Well, if you haven't received your mail-in ballot and you're already registered to vote, you can make sure that you can get one of those or can request a mail-in ballot by Tuesday, November 1st. If you haven't registered to vote yet, you can go to your county clerk's office and register. You can even register clear up through Election Day at the polling location.
You guys are doing a lot of outreach to try to get voter numbers up. What have you seen so far as returns go and registration?
Well, it's hard to gauge returns right now. It's a midterm election, so it's not going to be as high as it was during the presidential election in 2020, but we do expect, projections are potentially that it will be higher than it was during the midterms in 2018. So we expect some really good turnout.
Yeah, definitely. We have a race at the top of the ticket that's drawing a lot of attention, so that could very well play into that. You've been reaching out to college campuses quite a bit to try to get them energized as well, the younger generation. Talk about the Utah Campus Cup and what the goal is there.
Well, this has been an initiative that the Lieutenant Governor, long before I was Lieutenant Governor, that Lieutenant Governor has undertaken here in the state of Utah. And the staff goes out to our various institutions of higher education throughout the state and encourages them to get people registered to vote. And there's a competition, a healthy little competition. This year, BYU so far is winning. Weber State's nipping at their heels, but I think there are some folks in the BYU political science that are just bound and determined to win this year.
I was going to say, I think my youths need to step up and do a little
They do. I want everyone to be a winner here. So, you know, they need to get people registered to vote.
Talk, though, about the importance of getting the next generation, the younger voters involved in this process.
Well, if you look at our institutions, of our democratic institutions, and even some of our civic institutions, we're kind of aging out. It's really important for the next generation to understand the importance that they play, the role that they play in building up our democracy, making sure that we are preparing them as future leaders. So we need to make sure that the very basic thing is to vote. We need to make sure that our youth understand the importance of voting and the importance of civic engagement.
One option for voters will be early options. I understand it kind of varies from county to county, but what would be your advice as far as early voting goes?
Oh my goodness, vote early. If you know who you want to vote for, get your ballot turned in. I have actually seen a lot of people telling others, you know what, wait, don't vote until election day and then go vote in person. That is a really bad strategy. That's just kind of suppressing your own vote. You never know what's going to happen on election day, if there's going to be bad weather, if a lot more people show up in person than we expect, than county clerks expect, the lines are going to be long. So I recommend people just vote early as soon as they know. If you want to vote in person, that's okay. You can look on your county clerk's website and see where those early polling locations are and when they are. And
we've really seen Utahns grab hold of vote by mail and take advantage of that.
Utahns love vote by mail. We had the Deseret News and Hinckley Institute did a poll earlier this year in February that showed that 81% of Utahns had confidence in the 2022 elections, that they'll be run well here in the state of Utah. So that poll was just conducted again a couple weeks ago and came out, and it's even higher now. It's 89% are confident in the security and the outcomes, that the outcomes of the 2022 election will be accurate.
Okay, I want to get into that a little bit more, but let's go over some more deadlines real fast. You already mentioned registration. Obviously an important deadline that people need to know about as far as mail-in ballots are returned as well, and that's the postmark deadline.
Yeah, so if you're going to put your ballot in the mailbox in U.S. Postal Service, it has to be postmarked by Monday, November 7th. But you can drop it in a secure drop box. They're all over your county, probably in your city. There will be a drop box that's got security cameras on it all the time. You can put your ballot in one of those up till 8 p.m. on election day. But if you put it in the post office, it's got to be postmarked by Monday the 7th.
Okay, let's get into more of that security since you bring up the cameras that are now monitoring drop boxes. Your message to those, you just gave the results of the poll, so there was still a lower amount of those that don't trust the election results. Your message to them?
Well, I would love to get that 11% that don't have a lot of confidence in our elections. I would love to get them and persuade them otherwise, but I am really happy that 89% do believe that our elections will be run fairly and accurately. There's no one who cares more about running secure and accurate and fair elections than your county clerks. County clerks are the ones who run the elections in the state of Utah, and they all care deeply about the process and do their very best to make sure things are run smoothly and fairly. And in fact, this year they've been opening their doors, inviting the public to come in, learn about the ballot processing system, how your vote is counted, how the system is run, really working to educate the public.
Your thoughts on the climate that they are facing right now? We were talking before we started the show, and it's a little surprising as to how many county clerks are stepping aside. Talk about that number and why you think that's happening.
Well, we've got 29 county clerks in the state of Utah. Since 2020, between now and then, 17 of them have either retired or announced that they will be resigning and not running for re-election this year. So that's almost 2/3. That's about 2/3 of our county clerks will be new. A lot of that is because some of them have been there for a long, long time. And you know, it's a very politically charged environment right now. It's very difficult. There have been threats to our election workers. It's uncomfortable. It's sometimes a little bit scary, and they're not willing to keep doing it for a longer period of time. If they're close to retirement, they just decide, you know what, I'm done. But others have stepped away even earlier, and it is very concerning.
You have long stood up for the election process here in the state of Utah, but you've also said, look, if we can improve it in ways, I'm open to doing that. Talk about the changes that have been made this year, and are you satisfied with those? Well,
I'm never satisfied because I don't think that we're ever done improving. I think we can always improve. And that, you know, I was a state senator for 8 years before I became lieutenant governor, and we have worked on elections every single year, and we will continue to do that. We implemented, there were a lot of election reform bills this year, 33 election-related bills. One of them a big reform bill that I was deeply involved in to make the process better. We want people to have better access to the ballot, but we also want to do things that are going to make ballot security, election security, more robust. So anytime we can find ways to do both of those things better, I think we in the state of Utah have shown that we want to do that.
Talk about the top violation you see, or the most common violation you see here in the state of Utah.
Well, when it comes to fraud, I guess, we have a lot of checks and balances in place. Now, people who are going to try to commit fraud, I guess, are going to try to commit fraud. But we have systems in place to prevent them from being successful. One of the things that we have found the most often is that family members might sign another family member's envelope. For example, a mom of a missionary might, even with her child's permission, sign the envelope of their child's ballot and send it in. That gets caught, and it doesn't get counted. And the clerk will call up, and they'll get a phone call from their county clerk and told that that's a crime and that they shouldn't be doing that. And we've never seen anybody do it twice.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. You may think you're doing something good in that situation, but bottom line is
don't sign someone else's envelope.
Yes. Okay. All right. You have a busy week ahead, and we hope to see you again on Election Day, or at least someone from your office. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Glenn.
You bet. Still to come, the balance of power. It's on the line in the nation's capital. What's at stake and what messages are resonating with voters? Our panel will weigh in on that a little later. But first, advocates calling for change, why they say formerly incarcerated felons should have the right to vote. We'll get to that after the break. The White House is still encouraging Americans to apply for student loan forgiveness despite recent challenges in court. Last week, an appeals court temporarily blocking the federal government, preventing the first round of eligible applicants from getting relief this week. Washington correspondent Raquel Martin with the story.
The White House says it's moving full steam ahead with its plan to erase student debt for millions of Americans.
I'll never apologize for helping working and middle-class folks.
Monday, the president renewed his promise to help student borrowers, despite a recent court decision that temporarily blocks relief.
I don't know who they think they are.
They are 6 Republican state attorneys general, and their lawsuit argues the president's student loan forgiveness plan will hurt student loan service companies in their states.
Certainly has standing to sue.
John Carlo Canaparo with the Conservative Heritage Foundation says the lawsuit also accuses the administration of misusing federal emergency powers.
Do you think it's a smart idea for this administration to still be encouraging people to sign up?
No, there are going to be a lot of people who are signing up. And if indeed, as I suspect, a court will enjoin this, they will have the rug pulled out from under them.
But the White House says not to worry.
It does not reverse the fact that a lower court, the court dismissed the case. Let's not forget that, or suggest that the case has any merit at all.
The next ruling that could extend or dismiss the pause is expected as early as this week. In Washington, Raquel Martin.
We're a little more than a week away from the midterm election. Washington correspondent Rashad Hudson showing us one group that is working to let people who have served time in prison know they may be eligible to vote.
Avalon Betts Gadsden says her wrongful conviction in 2015 cost her a fundamental right.
Prior to that time, I had been very active as a voter.
Now, she's not only working to get her vote counted, but is helping others get their rights restored too.
We are on the cusp of re-enfranchising all of our brothers and sisters that are currently incarcerated.
The Sentencing Project says that due to felony convictions, 4.6 million people are unable to vote in next month's midterm elections.
3 out of 4 of the people disenfranchised are living in their communities, having fully completed their sentence.
But Porter says their work is making a difference.
That there is a movement to continue to expand the franchise, to continue to expand voting rights.
Chris Eugen, a professor at the University of Minnesota, says in many cases, people who have had their voting rights restored still don't know it.
You know, we have to let people know in states where you are indeed eligible that you are indeed eligible.
Other groups are calling for federal legislation to give people back the right to vote once their prison sentence ends. Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
Still to come, the race for U.S. Senate in Utah entering the final full week. Our panel weighs in on where it stands after the break. Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Representative Candace Perucci and former Utah Democratic Party Chair Jeff Merchant. Great to have both of you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Big week as we head into the final week into the midterm election. So let's talk about the balance of power in the nation's capital. It's up for grabs. Representative, let's start with you. What's at risk as voters fill out their ballots?
So right now, we are seeing lots of polls coming out that are anticipating that the Republicans are going to be able to take back control of the U.S. House of Representatives, thank heavens. Now, how big of that take back, we'll have to see. There's an estimate from either 12 to 25 seats, upward of 30 seats. We've got 50 competitive seats right now in the U.S. Congress and the House, and about 33 of those are listed up as toss-ups. So there's a lot riding on this election. But as I have been out knocking doors, talking to voters, the economy is #1, top of mind for people. In fact, I've had constituents stop me in the grocery store. We're talking about the price of groceries. There's definitely an increased amount of people who are shopping in the clearance section at the meat department. at the grocery store. So really, people are trying to put Cheerios on the table for their kids, and the economy, inflation, and the failed policies of this administration are what are on the ballot. And I am hopeful and excited that we'll be able to take back the House as Republicans.
All right, Jeff, let's hear from you as voters make their decisions. This is really an important election because it sets the table for the next 2 years. What do you see at risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we see a lot of things that may create some serious problems for the government generally just moving forward. Certainly, I agree that the economy is probably the most important thing. I think that hopeful Democrats out there are going to try and do, and we have tried to do everything we can to focus on issues like Roe v. Wade and some of the other issues that really have some serious implications for privacy in this country. But, you know, the economy is a thing that affects people every single day. And the reality is that that's something that people are going to be voting for. Now, here's the interesting thing. In a normal election season, I think that you would see Republicans having much larger gains in a midterm election, especially with Joe Biden having been elected 2 years ago. And we're not seeing that. It probably is likely that the House is going to go to the Republicans. The Senate is completely up for grabs. And I think that the Democrats generally have a huge disadvantage in these big statewide races, just inherently based on the way that the system works, at least in our modern time. So I think the Democrats are still holding in there. I have a lot of faith that the Democrats will maintain control of the Senate, and I think that that will at least allow for some action moving forward. Otherwise, if Republicans sweep the Congress, we're going to see nothing happen for the next 2 years, and this is not a time for that to be going on.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit more, because in the past we've seen a president of one party be able to work with a Congress of another party. Representative, do you see that being able to happen at all if that is the case after this midterm?
Well, I will just quickly on the Senate race. We had the Pennsylvania debate this last week, which was incredibly painful for people to watch. I have no doubt the Republican candidate in that race will be able to close that gap. So yes, the Senate's up for grabs, but I definitely think there's a good chance that the Republicans will be able to move the needle there. In terms of us being able to work together, if you're saying we have a split House and Senate, President Biden, unfortunately, has not really given any indication to Republicans that he's willing to work across party lines. He ran as a middle-of-the-road Democrat, but since going into office has really shifted far to the left to make it really hard for Republicans to even be able to come to the table or even be invited to the table. I will say there are critical issues like immigration that I would hope that we're able to get some solutions moving forward, especially for the sake of our border states and for those people and humans and lives that are involved in this political back and forth that we have. Also, for the sake of families at the table, I would hope that the House with Republican control would be able to put a pause on terrible fiscal policies that continue to drive up inflation.
Jeff, your thoughts on that? If we are in this split situation, the American people still expect work to be done and to move forward. So what would be the keys in that situation?
Yeah. Look, I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that we don't have a Republican Party that's at least united within itself anymore. We've got really two Republican parties, one of which is made up of extremist Trump supporters, and one that's made up of people that want to see policy and want to see things change. The problem is that ever since the Hastert rule was passed, we don't live in an era where unless the majority party in the House all agree to something, that we're going to see anything happen. And so I really don't see much going on over the next 2 years with Congress and the White House working together. I don't think that that's because Joe Biden's not willing to do that. I think it's because we have a small subset of what I like to call the tyranny of the loud that are making one issue after another issue a culture war, and then we're not able to move forward. I think that, you know, blaming Joe Biden for the economy, well, the economy has come up and gone down dozens of times over the course of every president's administration. The same thing with something like immigration. When I was 18 years old, we were trying to figure out immigration. I'm now 45 and we're still dealing with immigration. We have the opportunity to fix these problems, but the parties just aren't willing to come together and try and fix them in a way that most normal Americans would do.
Representative, interested in your thoughts on the point Jeff brings up within the Republican Party and that dynamic that's playing.
So I would disagree. I feel like this election, Republicans are uniting around the fact that the economy, inflation, and terrible policies of this administration are actually bringing Republicans together. Having the ability to take back the House is huge. The opportunity to potentially take back the Senate is also big. We have a race in Utah, obviously. The Senator Mike Lee running against Evan McMullin, that also is in the balance. That's really mobilizing Republican voters who have stayed home, but now are feeling the impact of these policies at home and are actually jumping out and voting on it. And to say that this president has zero control over the economy, it couldn't be farther from the truth. If we were to actually have some energy independence as a country and use our own resources, we'd be able to bring down these gas prices that are having crippling effects on people and the supply chain. The Inflation Reduction Act didn't work. It didn't reduce inflation as was promised. And then adding on student debt. I mean, it's almost as if it's just a domino effect that this administration, it's like a two-hit punch, and it's just not working for the American people and for families. So I feel like the Republican Party, we are unifying around the idea that we are the free market, limited government, conservative party that wants to empower families and honestly return more of their hard-earned money back into their pockets.
Jeff, your response when we talk about the president's energy policy and what he has done as far as getting bills passed like the Inflation Reduction Act.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, when we're talking about energy infrastructure, we had 4 years of Donald Trump. That infrastructure didn't entirely get built in the 4 years that he was there. I don't know if we can just say that this is all because, you know, Joe Biden has somehow managed to stop all energy production in this country. We still have plenty of energy production, but because of economic situations, it's not always beneficial for these people to go out and invest. Sure, there are probably ways and things that we could do to make that better. But the reality is that even if all the Democrats came to the table and said, let's do something, I still don't believe the Republicans are united enough to be able to do that. That's why we have a competitive Senate race in Utah, right? I mean, you've got Mike Lee, who makes up these kind of libertarian, kind of MAGA-like Republicans, and then you've got Evan McMullin, who's trying to build a coalition, right? So he's got moderate Republicans, he's got independents, he's got Democrats. I know the Republicans want to say that he's just a Democrat in sheep's clothing, but if you watched that debate a couple of weeks ago, they share a lot of the same views. It's really what the focus and point of government is that's the big difference. Mike Lee doesn't think that the federal government should really have much to do with anything. Evan McMullin believes that there's a place and role for the federal government in policy and in working in people's lives.
Representative, you've already touched base on the race for Senate here in the state of Utah. How do you see it as we sit at this point in time right now?
So I would disagree, not surprisingly, on the analysis of Evan McMullin. It's fascinating to me that Democrats, you know, tout themselves as being principled individuals and upholding their party platform, but the Democratic Party in Utah did not nominate someone to represent their party to do a de facto support of Evan McMullin. So it's hard to sell a brand of a policy and then completely pull it back to increase an independence odds. And I think there are huge issues with that. And I know even colleagues within the Democratic Party who are really frustrated by that. I think that in that debate, both of them displayed their true colors and were able to share their perspective on things. I think Senator Lee has shown, though, that he does work across the aisle, that he does work on issues. He's worked on criminal justice reform. He's worked on issues to help empower Utah families. The REINS Act is something he's been a huge advocate of. So to just throw out there that he hasn't done anything, he's not willing to work across the aisle, isn't true. Does he say no to things that maybe aren't popular? Yes, but as a mom, I understand the importance of saying no sometimes.
Okay, I have like 30 seconds left, Jeff. It'll go to you, but I'm really curious about this. You just mentioned yourself that policy-wise, you didn't see a lot of difference between Senator Lee and Evan McMullin. So why are Democrats getting behind him?
They're getting behind him because of things like January 6th, because of things like trying to overturn an election that was fairly won by a party that he didn't agree with. And I think that the reality is that Democrats, independents, and moderate Republicans see the value in our democratic and constitutional system.
Okay.
And despite the fact that Senator Lee likes to hold up a constitution every once in a while, it doesn't mean that he upholds the principles behind that.
All right, I'm sorry we have to end it at this point, but excellent conversation. Really appreciate both of you being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave now to look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The midterm election, we've been talking about it, it's next month. Mail-in ballots must be postmarked by Monday, November 7th. Election day is Tuesday, November 8th. The general legislative session, just a few months away now. Opening day is Tuesday, January 17th. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.